The simplified, not simple mantra introduced in 10th edition means there's a lot of changes to the way that lists are built compared to 9th. There's been an overall reduction in complexity in both the main rules and the units themselves in 10th edition, which, as a newer filthy casual player, is actually quite nice for me. One of the more controversial changes has been the introduction of free Wargear for all of your units and models. What this essentially means is that you can basically get any sort of special upgrade or special weapon without having to pay any sort of cost for it, and that cost is baked into the actual price of the points for the unit itself. Within the Warhammer community, there's been a lot of friendly conversation around this topic. And whilst the free Wargear does make things a bit simpler, perhaps there are some issues with it, and I certainly do have at least one issue with it. I actually don't really have a problem with the Wargear being free itself. I mean, I love free stuff. Who doesn't? Everybody loves a free sample in the supermarket. Everyone likes getting that little complimentary chocolate on top of the pillow at a hotel. And the complimentary pillow. Everybody like me enjoys going down to the park and taking the complimentary ducks as well. And my favorite feeling in the world is entering a bank and just getting free money. There are a couple of oddities around this. I've discussed on the channel before things like the Chronos having additional things you can add, but they're all free, so why would it not just be part of the base model? But to be honest, I don't think this is really a common problem. For me, there are positives to the simplification of the Wargear. It's much easier to understand what a unit does on the data card without really having to work out what that unit does as part of the list building process. An example here is racks for Drukhari. In 9th edition, you would have to buy the extra upgrades if you wanted them, and there seem to be quite a lot of different options. Now, there's few less options and you're bound to take them. What that means is, for me, is I know what my racks are going to do in every single game in 10th. They have a very specific role they have to play because I know exactly what kind of weapons they have and I know what I want to do with them. In 9th, it depends on what weapons you take may change how you play with them, making it a bit more confusing to understand how to utilize them properly. Things like Thousand Suns Rubric Marines, you can really decide between the Flame Bricks and the regular Bolter Rubrics without having to pay a premium for the Flamer. But the nice thing here is that the Bolters actually do have a slight advantage over the Flamers in some situations because of their interactions with the stratagems. So you're not paying for the price in points, you are paying the price in potentially losing some of your tactical options, and instead being able to just set everything on fire. Just a general overall simplification of some of the options, especially when you're looking at stuff like Space Marine Intercessors. Reducing these things to only having actually one gun and then one special is a lot nicer. In 9th, you had so many different choices, it kind of became a bit overwhelming. I also don't really mind the actual group sizes being very fixed to either like 5 or 10, because that actually does help me learn the game better, learn exactly what each unit is going to look like and what it would actually do and what role it should play on the tabletop. I also think it means it might be easier to balance going forward. You don't have to start tweaking small minutiae in terms of points with Wargear. You could just change the actual whole point value of a unit or just change the weapon. With all that being said, I can definitely see the argument against pretty much everything I've just said, right? Not having the flexibility to change your racks to do what you want to do in your list, or losing access to stratagems just because of a certain weapon you took, or not having that flexibility within your intercessors to take weapons for a very specific purpose. And also, even balance-wise, there are times where maybe just that weapon is just too cheap or just too easily accessible, and you have to nerf the entire unit just to nerf that one weapon. There are also other things about this. I know, for example, in Kabalites, having to suddenly find a shredder and a splinter cannon instead of just having a bunch of blasters is a bit annoying, but again, this is going to be army dependent and also model dependent. I personally do think these changes are good for the health of the game in the future. 9th definitely became more overcomplicated, and I think simplifying things in this area does help with overall improvements and eventually help the balance as things progress through this edition. I did say I did have one problem with the free Wargear. So what is that problem? The problem is now that there is a horrendous void in list building, a zone I like to call the final 50 points. If there is one thing that 9th edition list building gave you, it was that freedom to tweak things by 5 or 10 points. If you had like 30 points left, you could definitely add a few little weapons here and there for 5 points, or if you accidentally got yourself over by 10 to 15 points, you could pull some of those weapons back. No such luck in 10th edition. The only things you really have are the character enhancements. They cost somewhere between 10 and 30 points normally, but the problem with that is you actually also need a character to attach them to. In making my 10th edition Screaming Ravens list for 2,000 points, I've been unable to properly hit 2,000 with a list I actually like. Centurions, for example, being 175 points means that I usually end up short by 30 to 40 points, and nothing fits in that gap. In 9th, I could have added a couple of special weapons here and there, but in 10th, it's entirely back to the drawing board. You have to start tweaking things in massive point values like 90 or 100 or even 200, take an entire Dreadnought out to try and fit something else in there. I managed to get a list that was 2,000 points, but the problem was it didn't include the thing I wanted. I had to change things and add something that was 200 points, but really I want those Centurions, which are actually like 175, so I'll have 25 points short, but I can't add any of the enhancements to a character because I've got no characters left, and I can't buy a new character because that costs 80 points, which is to go for 2,000, so it's all just kind of... And this becomes a bigger problem with the more elite armies. Drukhari aren't too bad because most things are cheap, so you can add something for like 50 points if you do need to. Thousand Sons was a bit more of a struggle, but they have quite a few characters, so you can actually use the enhancements to build up that point cost. Thousand Sons have one of the few examples where something only costs 5 points, and it's Araman's Disc. You can take him on and off it for only 5 points, which is actually kind of useful. But Space Marines, though, that's been a real struggle, especially because a lot of things I want to include are quite chunky in point cost. The thing is, even if I'm happy with the list, there's just something so tilting about having like 1970 points. It feels like there's 30 points of potential just being left on the table. I mean, this is despite the possibility that changing the list to 2000 makes it a worse list from the balance perspective. Age of Sigmar is basically using the same system. You have very fixed unit sizes, very fixed war gear. All Wargear additional is free, but they have the Triumph system, which means that if you start with less points, you actually gain a bonus. Why wasn't this ported over to 40k? 40k needs a Triumph system, so that having a list below 2000s is a technical choice, not just a maths problem. I'd love to hear all your thoughts on this. My perspective is coming from someone who is quite new to the game and also doesn't have a good understanding of every single army. I understand the armies that I'm trying to build, so potentially there are armies out there where this free Wargear is either very good or very bad. So I'd love to hear about your opinions in the comments below. I do love reading all your comments, but that will be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.